All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to our talk. Thanks for sticking in with us here, last day of Coalesce. We're going to be talking about getting buy-in for data infrastructure development. It's a very topical topic, hopefully. Basically what we're going to be going through, we'll start off with some intros, introduce ourselves, then we'll introduce the problem, including the speed rigor spectrum. We'll explain what that is. We'll spend most of our time talking through some of our tactics for getting buy-in for data infrastructure work, and then we'll walk through how we're applying that at Expel, and then we'll wrap up with some question and answer. So let's get into it. So I can kick us off here. My name is Remy. I am the Principal Analytics Manager here at Expel. Expel is a cybersecurity company. We're based, our headquarters is in Herndon, Virginia, but we're remote first. I'm based in Salt Lake City, Utah, originally from Minnesota. Basically I'm leading out our centralized analytics function, been with Expel about 10 months. Ramzi, you want to?
Yeah, I'm Ramzi. I'm a principal data engineer at Expel. I've been over over 2 years now. As Remy mentioned, we're based in Herndon. I'm local to Herndon, but we're remote first. And Remy has explained, Expel is a cybersecurity company, and we help reduce your alert fatigue. All
right, so let's start off talking about the speed rigor spectrum. So I used to work at Lucid Software, and this was something we used to discuss all the time on the analytics team there. And so the basic premise here is that a stakeholder or someone comes to you as in your data team with a request of some sort, and you kind of have a decision to make as to where it falls on this spectrum. And so on the left, we have what we call quick and dirty. This is the kind of thing where, hey, we just need something now. There's an urgent decision that needs to be made. We need a data point for this. So for example, your CEO comes to you, says, hey, how many active users do we have in the product over the last month? The CEO doesn't necessarily need the exact number. They need a rough estimate. They need something quickly, though. They're not going to want to wait weeks to get that answer. So it's really about getting the answer quickly and making those important, urgent decisions, but not having that precision that you otherwise might get. So directional in nature is the way to think of that. This isn't really scalable. Imagine a situation where there's 5 different quick and dirty estimates of active users. They're sitting in different queries in different places, different spreadsheets, et cetera. You can already tell where this is going. That does not scale very well. There are discrepancies that come up, and all of a sudden you find yourself trying to reconcile discrepancies, which does not always, it's not the way we want to be spending our time necessarily. So if you go to the other side of the spectrum, we have what we call full rigor. And so this is for persistent needs, things where you really do need that level of accuracy. You need to make sure that we have reporting for KPIs, things match across the company. And this kind of thing really needs that scalable data infrastructure in order to be successful. You can create those robust data outputs. You can really take it to the next level. So as your company matures and as your data practice matures, you really want to be moving towards that full rigor from that quick and dirty. And each individual ask can fall somewhere along that spectrum. But as you get these needs for more of that rigorous data output, you need to be investing in that scalable data infrastructure. And that is something you need buy-in for, because it takes a lot of effort and time in order to do correctly. So that's where this really, that's kind of the framing for all of this. From here we're going to start talking about tactics for getting that buy-in for your data infrastructure work. So Ramzi's going to talk about painting a picture of a world with scalability and finding your champions, and then I'll talk through proper prioritization and communication.
Yeah, so starting off with painting the world with scalability. And to understand that kind of balance, we're trying to get stakeholder buy-in by the way we talk about our projects, and how we talk about them is important. So sometimes the technical details stick to certain teams versus other teams. Sometimes it's the outcome that they really care about, and that's generally the theme that we're trying to follow. It's like the outcome that you create is more important than the technical details. I'll give an example. Customer success does not care that I built a real-time streaming service in Apache Flink. They care about the outcome of that pipeline, so they're able to represent data more accurately to the customer or do something differently that they couldn't before. So we want to make sure we meet our stakeholders where they actually care about. I admit I kind of also fall in that trap of I care about the technical details as an engineer. I want to talk about that. Sometimes that matters to different stakeholders, maybe engineering, but whereas the outcome of what that is building is more important. And then the next piece is finding your champions. Whenever you start having those conversations, you're going to have people that immediately resonate with those kind of topics that you're talking about, and they can see the value that it gives them. And they're immediately going to be advocating for you because it's a mutual beneficial relationship. Other times, there's going to be people that you need on your side because there might be some mutual relationship that could help each other, and you're going to ask them to advocate for you so you can push that project to the next step. The most important thing and what's key is you have to actually deliver for them to continue to advocate for you. If you're not delivering on what you've promised initially, it's going to be hard to have them in your corner to advocate for you. And the advocating for you is super important to get projects across the line or get buy-in from other people that might be ancillary to them to push that project or get buy-in for some other services. One of my strongest champions have been my manager. I hope for everybody, your manager is your strongest advocate. She consistently advocates for what's best for the organization, but myself, how I grow in my career trajectory and pushing where we need to go.
All right, so the next thing we're going to talk through is proper prioritization. So, let's say we've got some initial buy-in, we're starting to work on our data infrastructure development. The business, unfortunately, does not just stop and wait for you to build out your data infrastructure. Things still come up, there will be data needs, things will change, other needs will arise. And so this can present a little bit of a crossroads, right? You need to know, what should we actually be working on? Should we jump at this new opportunity, this new thing that comes up and abandon all of this stuff that we just got all our buy-in for? Or do we say, heads down, we're only working on data infrastructure for a few months, and then we'll deal with the business needs? And the answer is it can be either way. It depends on the actual needs of the organization. And so being on the data team, you have a unique opportunity and a unique perspective where you can kind of step back and say, okay, what are the actual needs of the business? And so you can use your own knowledge. And if let's say you don't totally understand why something is needed, you can ask why. Always ask, why are we doing this? Why is this coming up? What decisions are we trying to make? Focusing on that impact potential, and that can enable you to say, hey, this actually is really important. Let's get something quick and dirty for this, and let's unblock this particular stakeholder on this because the business really needs that now. Or you can say, hey, this thing would be really nice to have, but it'll be much easier if we work on this in 3 months when we have this pipeline set up. And you can have those conversations with your stakeholder, but focusing on that business impact can really enable you to make those decisions. Otherwise, you either can find yourself missing out on opportunities because you're too focused on your infrastructure, or you could not work on your infrastructure because you're too focused on all the new things that come up. It's nice to strike that balance and make sure that you're consistently delivering on things that are the most important to the business. The last one we'll talk through here is frequent communication. Data infrastructure, if you're doing it right, it takes a long time. And a lot of times it doesn't have those shiny milestones, doesn't have those shiny outputs that people want to see as you go. But that doesn't mean that you need to just go into a hole and then emerge 6 months later with a shiny data infrastructure after that. It's really important to give those regular updates and check-ins as you're going, and for a few reasons. One is things can change. Maybe a new product has launched, or maybe something else has changed in the business since you started your initial plan. You need to make sure you account for that in your own planning and infrastructure work. Another thing that can happen is you're not necessarily top of mind for your stakeholders when you're going and doing your data infrastructure development. It can be really valuable to give those proactive updates in order to stay top of mind. Another thing is let's say something did come up and you didn't, let's say you went a week and you didn't actually make any progress. It can be tempting to just say, oh, we don't need to tell our stakeholders about that. But it's actually kind of the other way around, where if you give an update, even if there wasn't any progress in a particular time period, you're the one following up. That's something I really like to hone in on, is I like to be the one following up. If I commit to something, I don't want someone checking in on me. I want to control the narrative. I want to be seen as that reliable person. So even if I didn't deliver in a particular time period, I'm still controlling that narrative. People see me as reliable, and that just reinforces that buy-in as we go. And so we'll talk through kind of some of our examples in the next section there. But yeah, the punchline there is frequent communication is really important for maintaining that buy-in as you go. So yeah, let's talk about how we're doing this at Expel. Turn it over to Ramzi.
Sure, yeah, definitely want to practice what we preach, and starting with that paint of picture with scalability. So we had a project where we came into an issue where we wanted to measure customer retention and these leading indicators for some analysis and some output there. We simply didn't have the data, so we had to bring in some of those data sources that you see, your Google Analytics, your CRM, all these different sources, and build some bespoke pipelines to get that data in. The actual analysis and output using those leading indicators for customer retention, so we can understand what is an ideal healthy customer profile, or what it does, what it's take to actually reduce churn, was the output that people actually cared about. They didn't care that we had to build these pipelines and put that data into the data warehouse and start modeling that data. The output actually got more, it resonated more with people and the stakeholders, because we're showing the value that we're bringing to the table, and also that they would actually care about what the output is, because they're actually interacting with that directly. So that got more people on our side for the future work that we're potentially leading into. And then going back to our champions, it's been really important to get those people on our side. Our initial champions were kind of siloed, and we just weren't really communicating at first. So on the strategic finance side, Remy's team, especially Mitchell and Colin, immediately saw his vision and his kind of path for what we wanted to have more scalable infrastructure and have a single kind of source of truth, and immediately resonated with that. In parallel, my manager Jane was advocating to bring in some new data into our data warehouse and start having some of that data for our AI and ML team. So those kind of converged eventually when we started communicating with the platform and data platform engineering team with Micah and Jake, and they were on board what looked like the future state of our actual data infrastructure and our data platform. So there were definitely those people advocating for us to push and get the kind of buy-in we need across the organization, from engineering, finance, or the AI and ML team.
Awesome. And yeah, so as we've been working through some of this data infrastructure development, surprise, the business did not stop doing the business stuff. Yeah, a lot of new things have come up since then, and it comes onto our plate. And so we need to make a decision. Do we work on this new thing? Do we just continue to try to build out our DBT models and all that stuff? And the answer is a little bit of a mix, right? So a couple examples. One is became obvious a few months ago that we needed better reporting and visibility into some customer feature requests and product gaps, and that helped. We built out essentially a dashboard that enables us to visualize that in a consolidated place, which has helped facilitate a lot of good discussions between product, customer success, et cetera, and really just align on the language that we're speaking there. It was the kind of thing where to build it right 100% would have taken a long time, but we needed it now. And so I whipped something up in half a day or whatever, and it's been helpful. And so in my opinion, that's a good use of time. It unblocked a lot of decision making for the business, which is kind of what it's all about, right? We're eventually going to come back and make it more scalable, but we needed to get something out there in order to make decisions in the short term. Another example is our security team had some metrics that were pretty difficult to get. It was not a particularly scalable process. It was taking people many hours in a given week in order to report on some of these metrics. And so I built out essentially I would call it quick and dirty, if we're using that terminology, a quick and dirty report that enables them to get that, and that has saved them time in the short term. Again, eventually we'll have that a little bit more scalable. We'll put some more rigor behind that, but the need was immediate. And so the reason we decided to do that instead of waiting until our pipelines are in a perfect spot is that the business needed it now. We understood the impact potential, and we were able to find kind of a middle ground, get something quick and dirty now, but eventually it will come back and make it more scalable. So, other things have come up. I've had other requests come in, and we say, hey, I see why you want to have this. Let's talk about this a little bit later. We don't really have the bandwidth right now. We're focusing on this other stuff, and people are receptive to that. This has been helpful, though, in that we're not just seen as an organization that we're laser focused on our infrastructure, that kind of thing. We're seen as business partners who will meet people in the middle, and we have those outputs that can help reinforce that buy-in, which has been helpful. And so yeah, the last part here is just around communication. I'm a big fan of Slack. I think it's a super helpful resource for remote first people in particular, but really for any company. And so we've set up a dedicated Slack channel for our data infrastructure development, where we provide these periodic updates so that those people closer to it can stay in the know. They can see what progress we're making, what blockers we're facing, where we're succeeding, where we plan to succeed later, that kind of thing, and really create some dialogue around that progress. But not everybody at the company needs to be at that level of granularity. They care generally about the output, but they don't necessarily need every single update that happens. So we have another more broader channel where we give, maybe every month or 2 months, we'll give an update on, hey, here's where we're at, here's what this means for you, just to keep people in the know. They say, okay, yeah, Remy and Ramzi, they've got it covered. They know what they're doing. I'll take a step back. I know what it means for me. So tailoring that communication to the audience is really important there as well, because some people will care super detailed, some people won't as much. Another thing I like to do is just kind of give casual reminders when I'm in meetings with people. We're meeting with stakeholders at different times. Sometimes there's something they need. It's something that I'll sort of throw in a conversation, right? Say, hey, this is what we're doing right now. Eventually, we're going to have X, Y, Z that's going to help you do A, B, C. That can help reinforce that enthusiasm for what we're doing as we go, and can help people just, kind of recycle that buy-in and gets that enthusiasm flowing a little bit. So, communication, though, is key. Again, like whether you've got a big update, a small update, no update at all, being the ones to actually bring that up is really the thing that I like to focus on. And that's pretty much it. With the right tactics and attitude, you can get this buy-in for data infrastructure development. It's the kind of thing where not always sexy, not always the shiniest thing, but it's important. We need to work on it, and getting buy-in is a critical step to that. So making sure you find your champions, paint that picture of a world of scalability, communicate effectively, and prioritize things as they come up. That's kind of the framework we're using at Expel, and so that's what we're trying to do here. So hopefully that was helpful. But thank you for your time. We have some time for questions here at the end. There's also a survey. We'd love to hear your questions. Thank you.
I've got one. I don't have a mic, so you guys want to repeat it. When you do quick and dirty.
Yeah, getting a mic here.
Hey, when you do quick and dirty, do you deliver it in like the DBT or the infrastructure way that you like for the long term, so that downstream users can not have to refactor when you do get a chance to refactor and build it the right long-term way?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the question, I think everybody heard it, but just to repeat it, was when we do a quick and dirty output, do we use a DBT model so that people can have can basically pull from the same downstream table? Is that the general premise? Yeah. I think it depends. I think, again, it's a spectrum. We can go back to that as a helpful visual here, because I've got a clicker. Yeah, so again, it's not quick and dirty. I would say like on the far left end of the spectrum is not a DBT model, because it takes some time. There's a code review, there's a PR, there's testing and all that stuff, which is important. We need that. That's important. But if your CEO needs something in 20 minutes for a meeting, he or she is not going to want to wait for a DBT model. So whereas there's a middle ground in here though, where you can say, hey, we might not have the single source of truth for that, but we have an approximation, and we can make an assumption, and that can fall. And so we can make a DBT model out of that and get something by Wednesday of next week or something like that. And that's a conversation you should be having with your stakeholder, in my opinion, to say, hey, when is this needed for what decision? And then that can help you align on the correct output. And then so I consider this a spectrum, really. So that's a great question, though. Thank you. I don't know, Ramzi, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it really depends. But as I mentioned, like you mentioned, it's kind of like where you need to be at the time. So like if somebody needs something quickly, maybe it's just a query in like your console, and there's like giving them the output. Always thinking of what the long term would be. Like, okay, maybe I'm just gonna copy paste this into DBT eventually, or figure out where does this need to be added into another model because we need to enrich that with data.
All right, so the question, if I heard correctly, was, is there a way to flag the quick and dirty things so that we could eventually come back to it and make it less quick and dirty? Is that essentially what you're saying? Yeah, Ramzi, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times is we have like a sandbox of like where we build stuff in DBT sometimes, or just like a regular query and stuff, and we don't give people access to that generally. So that's like where our quick and dirty things live. Or if we're like in a notebook, like a Hex notebook or a BI dashboard, we're really limiting what people do in that area and the access to. So it's like really important not to give everybody unfederated access to something, and like with the assumption like they're not going to share that out, and also where it's not like sprawling, everybody's using that as a single source of truth, with the caveat where we also like maybe sometimes flag it like explicitly. For example, in like Hex, some notebooks I have data sources I put as archive versus production ready. So like if it's an archive data set, yeah, you can use that for some tangential stuff, but you shouldn't be use that for any production or customer facing stuff.
When do you come back to that data, to that model? Is it when the question is asked again, or do you plan for a specific form?
I have my kind of opinion on it is if it comes up again, yeah, like if it's like a second time or a third time, it's like, okay, this needs to be automated. It needs to be done properly. A lot of times is it gets flagged and never gets worked on, but it's not a priority. It just simply like, if it's not going to come up again, I'm not going to work on something if it's not really that priority. Sometimes it's just a one-off ask. But if it's like a frequent ask, it's definitely where it's like, okay, the third time is like either automate it or put it in a DBT model at that point.
Yeah, going off on that, for me, it's around how many people are asking about it. If it's one stakeholder asking repeatedly, that is less concerning than 3 different stakeholders from 3 different departments asking for the same thing. That's where things get a little bit fishy, and you start to say, all right, we need to build something a little bit more rigorous. If customer success, sales, and marketing are all trying to speak the same language, but they're not. Oftentimes, in my experience, it's when you start to get those questions of, hey, why don't these numbers match? That's when it's like, all right, red flag or at least orange flag alert to, let's come back to this. Having a backlog isn't a bad idea either, whether that's a Doc, Jira, Asana, whatever, of like, hey, eventually address this. That way, someone else on your team could pick it up later, that kind of thing. Having that running backlog, for me, oftentimes it's a mental backlog, which I don't necessarily recommend. It's not the most scalable, but whatever works for you. Yeah, thank you for the question. Oh, we got one here. Yeah, we got our mic person here.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, how do you garner buy-in when you're working, let's say, like in a sector that's like heavily regulated, and there's like compliance requirements and things of that nature? Like, what is your advice or suggestions there?
Yeah, great question around heavily regulated environments. I don't have all the answers for that, although having recently moved into the cybersecurity space within the last year, it comes up a good amount more than I initially thought. And it's the kind of thing where I don't know the answers all the time, and I express that off the beat. I'll often come into a meeting with our security team, and I'll be like, you guys are the experts here. I don't really know this. Like, what are the things that we need to be making sure of? I much prefer to get those out in the open earlier, and then we can plan accordingly. Because if I'm breaking some rule, I want to know about that early and stop breaking the rule, of course. Or if if our plan is going to break a rule, we want to make sure, again, we get that out early. So I think just like being proactive is always the most important part here, is being, trying to mine for conflict and say like, hey, what if we did this? What if we put our data in S3 or whatever? Like, what could go wrong there? And they might say, oh, nothing would go wrong there. Or, hey, we really need to be careful about that, that kind of thing. I don't know. On the engineering side, it might be a little bit more explicit.
Yeah, definitely a great question. I think it, like coming from financial services and now working in cybersecurity, having dealt with there's really tight restrictions on PII, how underwriting works, or how you store customer data, for example. As Remy mentioned, is have these conversations early with the people. And what has helped me is figuring out what conversations need to happen in what order. Once I get that kind of check mark from that team, so our product security team kind of gives that check, and then I go to our core platform team, they give us that check, and then everybody agrees with that. Sometimes it means having that conversation with legal and to push that forward, and having that checklist of who do I need to give that sign off on so I can continue and get that buy-in to actually do what we need to do. that's like what's helped me at least.
And like you can get those people in the same room too. You don't have to have these conversations in silos. You can, have a Slack channel, have a standing meeting or a one-time meeting, and say, have a representative from legal, a representative from security. Just get the conversation flowing. Otherwise, you play intermediary, and that can be slower. And I'm not a fan of going slow.
Yeah.
Great question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody? Or did we explain it perfectly? Awesome. Well, we'll be around for a little bit
Yeah.
after as well. But thank you all for the time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for coming.